Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Thank you for attending San Diego County Winter Regional Conversation. And we're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. I'm Julie Baker, and we've got an amazing lineup here today. We thank you so much for joining us. So, Victoria?
Oh yeah, welcome everyone. So good to see all of you. I'm happy to welcome you as the president of Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. This is our second regional conversation in San Diego. We are organizing this in partnership with the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition, who you'll hear from today, as well as the City of San Diego Commission for Arts and Culture. So we have a full agenda. We'll have plenty of time for questions, opportunities for interaction. I'd like to begin the meeting by dedicating 2021 to our dear friend, Larry Baza. Our friend in arts advocacy. Just a few words about Larry. He was and remains a pillar in the arts community. His accomplishments have been rich and many. Has been recognized as an arts warrior, a community leader, a change maker, a champion of social justice, and a fierce advocate of individual artists. He has touched so many of us, and we're deeply grieving for our loss and his partner, Tom Null. I welcome you to put comments that you might like to share in the chat box about Larry. And before I introduce Julie, I'd like to recognize some of our board members from San Diego. I think you're being well represented. DeLuke Smith with the Lewis Prize, Bridget Cantu-Ware, the Old Globe, Felicia Shaw, the Women's Museum, and Jonathan Glass. I'd also like to recognize DeLuke and Alan Zeider as founders of the Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our, we like to say, our fierce leader, Julie Baker. Take it away, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you for that beautiful tribute to Larry. And he is gone but never forgotten. His legacy will live on. And here's the agenda overview to give you guys an idea of what we're going to do. So just rules of engagement are simply that, please put your questions in the chat, please put comments in the chat or speak. Really, this is a conversation. It's not meant to be passive where we're just speaking at you, but we want to hear from you. As the statewide advocacy organization, it's really critical that we understand what are the issues that you're facing within your particular region. We're doing 9 of these across the state. This is the second time we've done this. And it really helps us to inform our advocacy. So for example, the last time we learned that reopening guidelines was something across all of California that were needed. And so we've really focused a lot of our advocacy on that and creating a 50-person task force and doing specific things to really build around the need for the reopening guidelines, which I'll share more in my presentation. So yes, so please ask questions in the chat or speak up, raise your hand. You can use the raise hand feature, or if neither of those are working, just interrupt and say, hey, I got something to say, because we want to hear from you. We don't want it to just be us speaking at you, as I mentioned. And way to go, San Diego. You guys are always such an amazing example of incredible advocacy and collaboration and community. So I hope you guys all have that sense about you. But as the statewide purview, I can tell you San Diego is really one of the leaders in terms of arts advocacy. So congratulations. And you're so well represented, as Victoria said, on the board. So I think we should go ahead and get started, unless I'm missing anything. We've got a poll. Matt, did you want to introduce? And so pleased also that Matt Carney, who you guys all know from Sdrac, from San Diego Ballet, has joined our team at Californians for the Arts. We couldn't be more thrilled to have him as our programs manager, and it's just a fantastic partner in crime here in all good things for the arts and culture industry. So there's a poll that he's introducing just to get a sense of who's in the room. We're doing these across all of the different conversations that we're doing so that we have a sense of who's attending and who's not attending. And we want to make sure that really this is representative of who's in the state and the diversity of our state, racial and cultural diversity of our state.
Thank
Matt?
you, Julie. Yeah, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Victoria, and much respect to Larry. Glad that we can convene and this be a conversation. You'll hear updates today, but as far as CFTA and SDRAC, we are interested to hearing what's most important to you right now. So that could guide what we do going on here in the future. If we could just also, before we get started with Julie's update on the state level, just take some time in the chat to acknowledge the Indigenous land that you're on. Jade Alicia, our programs associate, will put a link in there if you do not know that answer, so we can give respect to where we stand. Would be a great way to start. So thank you for that. Welcome, everyone. Really good to have you complete this poll. We're about 85% done. So go ahead and get that so we can see who's in the room, and pass the mic back over to Julie to start with all the amazing stuff that's going on the state level. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna try share that. Is my screen now there? This is always the hard part about, do you guys see my screen? Matt, can you tell me if you guys can see it? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do what I hope will be a quick report for you so that you can get a sense of what's happening right now at the state level in terms of arts advocacy. I'm not going to do too much on the federal piece, but I'm absolutely happy to answer questions. Just to give an overview of where we are, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone here in the room, but we have had devastating loss to our sector. Estimated at $43 billion, 450,000 jobs. That's about 2/3 of the creative industries have been lost in terms of jobs. The other thing that's really startling, and these numbers are really important in terms of our case making for why we've been disproportionately impacted as a sector in terms of being shut down and unable to earn revenue. We've also had the largest percentage of job loss, well beyond the second largest sector's percentage of job loss, which is leisure and hospitality. We're not trying to pit any industry against the other. We're just, again, trying to really illustrate the intense impact for us. But I wanted to get more into like, what are we doing right now and what's been happening for the arts at the state level in terms of representation by your advocacy organization. We like to say we put the art in restart and that there is no California recovery without the creative industries. We do a lot of social media. So if you're not following us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, please do. And if you can, share our messages. We did an assembly hearing on the arts. We had 18 different presenters. They actually used our wording around our task force that we created that I mentioned before around reopening guidelines. And so the task force was really focused, the hearing was really focused on how do we reopen the arts safely and what do we need to do that. And out of that, there were a lot of really good things that came out of that. One of the pieces that we know in advocacy that is so critical is that you have to be at the table and you have to have your voice heard. Getting the assembly to do a hearing specifically only about the arts industries in California was the first step. And then it gets recorded, it's on the website for the assembly, and staffers, the 120 legislators we have at the state level are looking and they review those hearings. Out of that, we're really pleased to announce that we were the only industry that out of the $2 billion in small business grants has been highlighted for a specific chunk of that funding, which is $50 million for nonprofit cultural institutions. That is part of SB 87. There is Senate Bill 87, which is the budget bill. in early COVID relief. That program will roll out in about 4 to 5 weeks. We have actually been tapped by Lendistry, which is the organization, the business that puts out the grants, to be a community partner on this. So we will be having a meeting tomorrow with Lendistry to learn about what that means in terms of what we'll be offering, but we know it'll be technical assistance. It will be making sure that the field knows about the availability of these grants. What's important about this is that we also lobbied with California Association of Museums to make sure that there was no cap in the amount for how much your gross revenue is. So in other words, the small business grant program currently is for $2.5 million and under businesses. We lobby to make no cap for cultural organizations, but the max you can still receive is $25,000. The other thing that's important to note is that if you do not receive funding out of that $50 million, you can still apply for the rest of the $2 billion, but we will be able to actually have a separate application for this and hopefully have some influence on what that application language looks like for those of you who have applied thus far. Media coverage is also really critical to how we get awareness of the impact of what's happening to our sector, as well as what we offer in terms of solutions. And so we've been getting a lot of that. If you haven't been to our website, check it out, californiansforthearts.org. Look at the CFTA in the news, and you'll see all the different coverage that we've been getting. And finally, this Thursday, we're actually releasing our own impact survey that I think many of you took on terms of the impact on both workers and organizations, and we will launch that with the Otis report this Thursday. I wanted to give you a highlight of what we're doing in terms of our advocacy priorities. Number one is reopen. I shouldn't say there's a number one. They're all concurrent. So one is reopening guidelines for the live events performing arts industries that we talked about. We currently have no guidelines on the blueprint for a safer economy. Assemblymember Adrien Nazarian is going to do what they call a member letter. I actually was just working on it, that they will distribute among other legislators, asking them to sign on to urge the administration to issue these guidelines. Again, this is not because we want to open when it's not safe to do so, but we want to be at least on the roadmap to recovery and have those guidelines in place so we can prepare to reopen. In addition, out of our statewide task force, and LA County task force created about a 75-page guidelines document that includes things like being able to do live performances in red tier at botanical gardens, at the minimal tier starting to be able to do indoor performances with live audiences. So we have those have been approved by entertainment labor unions, and we're just trying to synthesize that down from 75 pages so people in government will actually read them. So we're getting there. That's exciting. The second piece that's really also big news that came out of the hearing, in my own testimony from California Arts Advocates, we talked about the Sustainabilization of the arts in the state of California. For many of you who've been fighting this fight for a long time, yes, it's better than $1 million. We're at $26 million, but that still puts us at 73 cents per capita per person in the state, and about 23rd across the United States, with New York about $2.31. And of course, the big one is Minnesota at almost $7. Assemblymember Sharon Quirk Silva from Orange County was sort of really surprised by that. And so we lobbied to her, and she is taking it up $1 for the arts, which is really exciting. That is she's done a budget introduction letter, and we're hoping to get someone in the Senate to also introduce that. And then that would start to go through the budget process. Whether that passes, I don't have a crystal ball in my hand to tell you, but we will definitely need your advocacy to help lift up the importance of increasing public funding for the arts in the state of California. California Creative Corps is a pilot program that the governor introduced, $15 million in his budget proposal. It's held up a little bit in the legislature right now. He had introduced $5 million in what they call early action, which is what that $50 million program came out of, and $10 million for the budget 21-22, which gets decided by June and sort of between now and June. In addition to the pilot, we're really pleased to announce that we're working with Senator Allen's office on introducing legislation specifically for the California Creative Corps. And that is as Senate Bill 628. I'll briefly talk a little bit more about what the Corps is. I don't really have a sense of how long I've talked, so I can't see chat when you're presenting. So maybe Matt, you can text me. And then funding to reopen safely. We know that we're going to need funding when we finally do get those guidelines. We're likely going to see potential things like ventilation systems that need to be introduced or worked on within our buildings, and widespread testing of performers and employees. All of this has associated costs, and we want to make sure that the government understands that and then prioritizes funding if they're going to put these types of restrictions. And we will support those if it means that people will be safe, of course. We'll need continued federal and state stimulus funding. As the feds release, hopefully, the next $1.9 trillion package, what's in it, at least from the Democrats, is funding to the states, as many of you access through CARES Act funding in that very first package. When and if those dollars come down to the state, we want to be poised to say, again, we need funding not only to keep us alive right now in this lifeline that we're all on, but also to reopen and recover and restart the arts. We also know that we need infrastructure and employment systems support living wage and housing, food security, and mental health for artists. What we've learned from our own impact survey is that the impact on artists has been severe. Obviously, many artists are out of work. What we also know is that the infrastructure and the systems were already quite fragile if you're a self-employed artist. And thankfully, the federal government put out pandemic unemployment assistance, but really that's really the only safety net that we see for artists. So we really want to focus on artists as a workforce, a valuable and critical workforce, and what do we need to be able to really create the systems to support them in a long-term fashion. We also know that this year has highlighted racial and cultural inequity and racism within the arts. We know that we have got to radically reimagine our business models, our hiring practices, our board recruitment policies, resources, and programs to center them in racial and cultural equity practices. We know that we're going to have to adapt some new program delivery models. I was talking to Felicia the other day, Shaw, and she said, normally she has prepared her and to put things up in a museum. Now she needs someone who's doing things on a virtual level to put them up in a virtual model. That's a very different skill set. So we'll need technical training support. And then I wanted to mention two bills that we're following, SB 805 and just also introduce Assembly Bill 1227. Those will actually be follow-up legislation specifically for the arts and performing arts industries to AB 5. They've just been introduced. All bills had to be introduced by last Friday. There were over 2,000 bills introduced by the legislature when they had asked to actually been doing that sort of quietly. Again, or not as broadly. Matt, tell me, how much time do I have left? Because I have other slides, or I could stop now, so tell me.
Keep flowing, do your thing. I think this is important information. Thank you.
Okay, so just quickly on the restart, as I mentioned, we're looking for those guidelines, audience, performer, COVID testing are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of extra cost, digital broadband program delivery needs, adapting our business models, and capital improvements. We also want to continue the messaging around arts are part of the solution. Can we repurpose our venues for vaccine distribution, public health education services? Can the state develop and support outdoor pop-up events employing local artists? Can we provide low or no cost access to the arts and compensate artists and arts organizations for services in order to start to train people to come back to the arts and to provide the social and emotional benefits of the arts? Quickly, I want to cover what is the California Creative Corps. The original concept is really, we have 63% of artists are unemployed right now, so we need a jobs creation program for artists. We also want artists and arts organizations to be seen, again, as part of the solution. And in this case, right now, what is the crisis we're in? Beyond racial injustice is also, and health inequities and all the other things that we're seeing as part of the results that have been highlighted through this crisis, but we are still deep in a public health crisis. How can artists and trusted local arts organizations help with local community strategies in culturally specific ways to deliver trusted messages around public health, masking, vaccinations, and so on? So that's really the idea of the pilot program, but the legislation would then have it be in statute. How do we develop a statewide training program for youth and veterans, the formerly incarcerated, and look for our opportunities to collaborate, for example, with the Climate Corps, which you see from both the Biden administration and the governor's office? How do we employ artists and community cultural organizations in neighborhood revitalization, infrastructure projects, and housing initiatives? And how do we really implement arts integration across all areas of government? As I mentioned, the $50 million in immediate relief funding has happened for the cultural institutions. I want to just again highlight how much advocacy works and collective advocacy works. It is all of your work that makes that happen. And a special shout out to the pro tem, Tony Atkins, for her continued support of our industry. And again, some of this stuff about TOT tax is really important. Your own city Department of Arts and Culture relies upon TOT tax. TOT tax in the state of California has been decimated. We want to make sure that your city agencies that Jonathan Glass chairs here runs here in San Diego can continue to provide the needed grants and programs that they're offering. And so we want to make sure that if there's federal funding, we look at that as well. And the dollar for the arts and all of the other stuff that we're looking at, unemployment assistance programs for self-employed, housing initiatives, rent relief, mortgage relief, all of the things. And we're tracking these 2,000 bills to see what is the ways that we can insert the arts. Finally, how can you engage? Use our toolkits and templates to advocate to the legislature, share our social media posts, and please join us in April for Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. We've got some specific trainings coming up in March, and we want to hear from you. So please reach out. You are more than welcome to contact me at any time. I try to make myself extremely available. So that's, hopefully I didn't go too long and you guys got a sense of what's happening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I know in the chat, Peter Kalivas had a question about one of the bills. I don't know if you'd see if Julie might have some answers. Were they general questions, Peter, or did you have something quick specifically that perhaps Julie could shed some light to? I can't see you, but you can unmute and just ask.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. I was actually just reading both SB 628 and also 805 today. And 805 sounds really promising in the sense that it obviously creates, from a legislative point of view, a wonderful sense of exemptions to the AB5 protocols. However, and I'm sure Julie agrees, the language of it remains really vague. It says still, within certain circumstances. Would that be fleshed out, do we think?
Yeah, so Peter, good question. Basically, right now, what happens is by February 21st, they had to get in placeholder language for bills. So now we get into the deep and nitty gritty of making what is actually in that bill. And then it goes to committees. And if it gets through committees or it gets held in committees, then it continues those negotiations. So there'll be a lot more information coming both about any follow-up language to AB5 and bills introduced, as well as the California Creative Corps as we develop those pieces of legislation.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, and we have another question from Patricia Frischer. Hello. Just in terms of any information that you have about the Creative Corps, is that a link that Jade Alicia could share in the chat, or anything specific about that coming out?
Yeah, I mean, we've written a lot. I mean, we've been working on some aspect of this, which is kind of like a WPA for the 21st century since about last April. So there's documents that we can share that have some language around that. Right now, it's still very much in the development stage, similar to what I said about AB5 follow-up. We are working very closely with Senator Allen's office on developing the language for the California Creative Corps. And if you've got, I mean, we would love your input. So if you've got thoughts, ideas, ways, or examples of what you're doing currently, because there's a lot of this happening throughout the state already. It's not that we're creating something and introducing something that no one's ever thought of before. It's really a way to put a structure around it and to socialize it and to hopefully have it in perpetuity. So we have jobs creation and the sense, not just a sense, but a real security around the fact that artists and arts organizations are valued, recognized, given contracts, paid for their work, all of those things. So that's kind of what, you know, the hope is for the California Creative Corps going forward.
Thank you. Alma, good to see that you have a question.
Yes, thank you. Following up. Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for all of your work and energy on this. You're amazing. Is the California Creative Corps part of the California Arts Council budget? Is that where it's being instituted?
Yeah, so right now it's in the governor's budget, as I mentioned, for $5 million in early action, and it goes to the CAC to administer that program. So the CAC has a meeting actually this week. I think it's also on Thursday, same time, unfortunately, as the launch of the Otis report, and where they will be discussing the Creative Corps. And I think looking at the council the way it works is that staff kind of creates the concepts around how the program would be administered, presents them to the council will vote on those. And I believe that's what's going to happen Thursday. The legislation will then be able to really flesh it out in greater and deeper language than what is in just a budget bill, because the budget bill didn't even have what they call trailer bill language. So there really is no language yet developed around this, except for what's starting to happen in the CAC or with us in the legislation language.
Well, I was particularly intrigued when you said returning citizens, people who are formerly incarcerated might be good candidates for this Job Corps. And
Absolutely.
there's definitely a need, and there's a lot of interest in employing them in the arts. And it would be a great opportunity.
I
So
agree.
I hope that stays in the language.
Okay, now let's talk about it for sure offline, because I think the success of the Arts and Corrections program makes a lot of, you know, connection. It makes sense to then taking that and saying, what's the next step, right? And so jobs creation is the next step when you're out of the system.
Exactly. And the CAC reentry program has been eliminated and reduced by the California Arts Council. So there is obviously a need and a gap in services that this could help address.
Well, let's talk. I would look forward to talking to you more about it.
Super, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alma. And just Delug put in the chat that the CAC will be discussing the Artist Corps at their meeting this week, and you'll see ways to make public comment. Before we head into a more city update, Julie, we have a question from Alan Zeider was wondering if there's any information in regards to capital investment. Alan, if you'd like to unmute to better articulate your question, or if that worked.
Yeah, no, thank you, Matt. And thank you, Julie. What you are doing and what the Arts Advocates is doing is all that we envisioned when Elma and I and others helped establish this organization 20 plus years ago. So thank you so much. Very rewarding to see this. The question I have is, as you're perusing these 2,000 bills through the legislature, if there's any opportunities for capital investment in facilities, whether it's making improvements, updating, modernizing, COVID safety, but also new facilities as well. It's a job creation opportunity. It puts people to work, usually high-paying jobs, which are so needed right now. So if there's any help that you need with that kind of work, please let me know. I'm happy to help.
Alan, thank you. I think what we're going to see, number one, is you're going to see infrastructure dollars coming from the feds probably, you know, in the spring in the recovery package that will then come into the states. We are hearing at the federal level, there's a lot of coming back of earmarks, which means that it's like pet projects, which we're not always in favor of. We'd rather see a more equitable process for people to access funding from, but at least, and then I think specifically, Alan, in terms of capital improvements, definitely think that there's an opportunity, especially with COVID relief, about making sure that your buildings and your venues are safe to reopen, and that might include things like new ventilation systems and so on. So I think that that's definitely going to be a point of advocacy, and as we develop that narrative further, once we get the guidelines and we understand what's being required, then we'll be calling.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to pass the mic. Keep the questions going in the chat. This is the whole reason, is to be here to respond to what's on your mind, definitely. But I'd like to hear an update from the city from Jonathan Gless. Thank you for being here today and your service in the city and reaching not just the city of San Diego, but your perspective since you stepped foot in the city to be countywide. It's very much appreciated, and we appreciate that shift in the culture at the city level.
Thanks, Matt. That's great. First, I want to give a shout out to, excuse me, the commissioners who are with us today. I see Rebecca Smith, Tyler Hughes, and I think Ann Bosler are with us today. So if you don't know, excuse me, those stalwarts, get to know them. They are great champions and advocates for the arts here in San Diego and beyond. I want to, before I give you a fast update on City Hall, I want to invite our colleague Francisco Morales from the front to give us a welcome from San Isidro. Francisco?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Francisco Morales. I am gallery director at the Front Arte Cultura, an art gallery managed by Casa Familiar in San Isidro, California. Our work is community development, social services, and arts and culture to empower our communities in South San Diego and also in Mexico. We work regionally, and we work with communities such as the Filipino community, the Mexican community, Chicano community, as a cultural connector. So in the name of Casa Familiar, I welcome everybody and thank you for being here. And this is a very important conversation. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Francisco. It's great working with you. So just really quickly, an update from City Hall. As most of you know, we have a new mayor, and we have a majority of new city council members. Council and the mayor both are very much prioritizing a greater emphasis on access and equity throughout the entire city. So one of the things that we're doing at the commission is, we'll be making public next week year 2 of our GIS mapping outreach system. And if you haven't seen it, take a look. It's totally cool. What it does is it takes 170 some odd organizations that we fund, and it actually maps the more than 1,000 points of touch in our communities. And what's so important with this is the organizations that many of you run hit every city council district, every neighborhood in this city. It is extraordinary. And it's been a real game changer inside in the way that we've been able to talk about the funding program. So please watch for the launch of that next week, and we'll make sure that you all have access to it. It'll be on the city's website. This year, more important than ever, the city's budget, as you all know, is extremely tight this year. There's a glimmer of hope in that it does look like federal funding is going to be going to municipalities, which will give us a sense of a relief. But I'll be really candid, that doesn't mean that when they are making priorities between homeless issues, continued COVID issues, et cetera, that the arts are going to be the top of the list. So it's going to be a really tough year for us. And my recommendation is get to know your new city council members, get to know them intimately, have your staff get to know them intimately. I don't think this is the year that you come from an institutional perspective. It needs to be personal. Who's in their district and how are you impacting their community? Many of you have longtime relationships with the electeds, and you know how it works. What are you doing for my district? So the more that you can make connections to the schools in the districts, to the parks, the libraries, as well as the institutions themselves, do it. We are here to help you parcel out that information, and certainly our friends at Sdrac and Arts and Culture San Diego have lots of information about that. The other thing I just want to give you a heads up on, two current opportunities if you're not familiar with these. One is phase 3 of the San Diego Arts and Culture Challenge. This time, phase 3 is targeted at mid-sized organizations, and the intent is to fund risk and change. We all know that we're coming out of COVID in a different world, and that oftentimes that means you need a second to really assess the viability. Nonprofits don't, as you all know, do not have the opportunity to take risk. So we want to help you with that. So go to the Sdrac website, take a look at the application. And then number 2, the Commission for Arts and Culture currently has an opportunity. We were able to reallocate about $250,000. City Council approved that a couple weeks ago. That is open to existing grantees. And this is specifically for COVID relief. So supplies, training, staff costs. If you have additional staff costs to deal with COVID, bring it on. That application is available and open right now. So I believe that's it, Matt. Happy to answer any questions.
Jonathan, we have Peter Kaminsky just wanted to share just how important that map is and how effective it is for advocacy. So just thank you for that, and just letting the commissioners know that. Molly Trvovich, she's the director of the Civic Youth Ballet and the executive director out there. She was wondering, will the map be updated due to the impact of the programs as a result of the pandemic? Is it updated annually?
Yeah, so great question. No, Molly, it's all based on your final reports. So it's FY20.
Great. And I think there was one more. I think that's it. Oh yes, Aaron Decker with the Conrad Preby's Foundation just wants to remind everyone that the deadline is March 5th. So as we sort of look at this, the state level, the things Jonathan are talking about on the city level, that's another foundation really taking a step forward in recognizing the value and impact of the arts and culture sector. That's it for now. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm sure if you could kind of stick around, if you don't mind, for questions along the way.
I'm here.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Jade Alicia will now put out the next poll that we have going on. And from here, I would like to please welcome Teresa Kozin. She is the co-chair of the San Diego Regional Arts and Culture Coalition. It's a rotating position, a 2-year position. So she's about halfway through her first year, and very thankful for her skill and her expertise in helping guide this organization and our members to where we may go. Thank you, Teresa. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have a great dance partner in Matt Carney. So thank you so much for participating today, all of you, in our regional conversation. We definitely have our work cut out for us with concerted advocacy efforts to elected officials at the City of San Diego. And Sdrac is working closely with Peter Kaminsky at Arts and Culture San Diego to make sure all of our members are actively involved in this effort. We want to continue to show how arts are essential to recovery and rebuilding, a stronger and more sustainable community for our San Diego area. And as you all know, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. So we really want to use all of the great advocacy skills and resources that Californians for the Arts has shown us they're doing at the state level on our regional level. And what we've done at Sdrac is really to work on also now a countywide advocacy initiative, something that's been missing in our region for a number of years. So we're hoping to get that launched shortly. Recently, the steering committee has spent time reviewing its own committee structure, and governance especially is a critical area for Sdrac. And a leadership in that area has been Felicia Shaw as our governance committee chair. And I'd like to turn the mic over to her just to talk a little bit about the work she's been helping us do and to revitalize the steering committee, which is the leadership group for Sdrac, as we look at how we're working through the DEI lens to better serve our members and constituents.
Thank you so much. So as everyone knows, Sdrac has existed as an informal membership organization throughout its history. We're not incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit, but instead, we operate under the fiscal sponsorship of Mission Edge, which works out really well. And that's also a fairly recent development for us. But we recognize that Sdrac needs to grow and broaden its reach to serve the entire San Diego region, not just the city of San Diego. So to that end, and as a member of the governance committee, we've been working on establishing more formal policies to guide our work that will take shape in the form of bylaws. You can all wake up now, bylaws. The bylaws will spell out how the steering committee, which is technically the board of Sdrac, operates, and how it will become more diverse and inclusive by inviting to the table different voices and backgrounds than we've had in the past. This opening up of Sdrac is long overdue. And I want to thank Stephen Snyder from Reuben H. Fleet and Carolyn Norquist from the Mingay, who've been my thought partners in this effort, along with the rest of the steering committee that's really committed to really reimagining how Sdrac functions and welcomes more voices into our organization. We'll be sharing more information on Sdrac as we evolve over the coming months, but I'm excited about where we are now as we become more inclusive of the entire county, artists, and other stakeholders in our arts and culture community. Thanks so much, Teresa, for allowing me to share a little bit about this exciting phase that we're in right now.
Thank you, Felicia. And thank you, Teresa, for that overview as well. We'd like to now just pass the mic over to Tara Gravis to give an update as we're, as Teresa and Felicia shared, the clarifying of our impact in the community is coming to clarify what programs and services we offer and what you can come to rely on and expect. So Tara, as you know, has been a leader in the community for a long time, and it's been great to have her really organize things and clarify what we do. So thank you, Tara, if you could kind of share what we can expect and what we've organized.
Sure. I just want to state for everyone what some of our goals and missions are at Sdrac. We're looking to be relevant in our community, and as we serve as a conduit between Californians for the Arts and so many other organizations here in California, we want to make sure that we're attracting and serving and engaging in San Diego County a diverse arts advocacy group for professional development, advocacy training, industry-wide convenings, candidate forums, and other programs. As you might imagine, we get together every year and think about what are we going to do, what's going to happen, or how should we adjust. So based on the fact that we got together last fall in the midst of COVID, we've pivoted just like most of you. And so we're having our quarterly town halls, but they've been online this year, and we've already completed 2. This is actually the 3rd one right now. And then we're working on doing our election work. Alan Zeider spearheads that for us, along with Peter Kaminsky, and they did a lot of that this fall as we went into the big election. We're looking to collaborate and plan with membership on biannual trainings. I know a lot of you do trainings, and so we want to make sure we're taking advantage of that and bringing the most to it for our community. And then we're gearing up now for April, and we'll have our virtual Arts Advocacy Days in April. And we hope that all of you will participate by sharing with us via video clips and other arts informed means what you've done this last year. How have you pivoted? What new collaborations have emerged, and what new things are you bringing forward that you might not have before? We want to celebrate arts advocacy and hear your voice in that. So that's where we are right now. And I'm sure that will continue training as we fine tune with the work of Felicia and the governance committee, the needs of our membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Well, we would like to deploy the next survey. So if Jade, Alicia, you can do that just to get an idea of how folks are advocating right now. And so go ahead and raise your hand or put it in the chat any questions you might have from now the state, local, or level with Sdrac, anything about that you'd like to discuss or any questions you'd like answered. While that happens, just want to make sure that there's a couple events just to save the date for you. On March 12th, Californians for the Arts would be doing an Advocacy 101. It really would be good on different levels of the staff and even board of directors to be part of that, to see what Jonathan is saying, you know, as we're heading into this very personal level of advocacy that's not as, it's probably in addition to being institutional advocates, but making sure that your constituents and your board of directors have those skills. That might be a good one to join. And then on the 26th of March, we have Advocacy in Action, and that's really going to clarify what our role and how we're going to organize in the statewide budget process to make sure that we have a whole week of advocacy happening to all the elected. So if joining that meeting will help you get involved to either be a team captain or making sure that you're attending these events. It's happened in a really nice way that things are going virtually because we can engage with more elected officials in that way rather than having to go to Sacramento and going into the offices. So
And
please
Matt,
join that.
Yeah, if I could jump on top of you for a second, and just add that on the 26th is also not just that 1 week of arts advocacy, but Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month is a month-long activities, actions, things that you can do from the comfort of your own home or wherever it is that you're working today to really amplify and uplift the impact of arts, culture, and creativity in the state or in your particular district, tagging your electeds and so on. We want to focus on what has been the negative impact sometimes, but we also want to talk about what are the positive things that we do for our communities that we need to continue and why we're critical to California's recovery. And we really want to celebrate at moments also the resiliency of our sector, particularly having been shut down for an entire year. So I think that there's a lot of great opportunities, and March 26th will teach you how you can, as Felicia asked, is there going to be a toolkit? This is when we'll really start to give you that really practical, what can you do in April to be a part of Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. So join us. We'll have that launching this week.
Thank you. And then we have a full day convening, which is professional development, networking, and just a lot of great information. And we've secured our San Diego Mayor, Todd Gloria, to be one of the featured keynote speakers for that day. So really great to have that San Diego connection. There's a couple things that came out in the data of these surveys that I'm kind of curious about, but I really want to open up to anything that is on everyone's mind, any questions that you might have. As Julie said, she's quite accessible. But while we have her on this format, anything coming on the state or local level?
You guys want to know more about, let's see, $50 million, $1 for the arts, California Creative Corps. What do you want to know more about? If I can answer, because they're all still very early stages, but happy to share. Or what are we not covering that you need us to think about? I know that rent and mortgage relief has been an issue for some. You know, what else should we be looking at in those 2,000 bills? As Alan is looking too, what do you want us to be highlighting? AB 5 we're working on. What else can we be working on your behalf or lifting up at the state level?
Judith Eisenberg was questioning, is there any more information about SB 805?
It's just what's out there currently. 805, again, as I mentioned, what happens in the way the bills get introduced is that there's a deadline, and it's kind of a placeholder, like a spot bill language that has to get in by a certain time. That's really what you're seeing right now. It then gets further developed into really what will it look like, and what will the exemptions look like. 805 is essentially an exemption for, I think the most recent language was performing arts organizations with budgets under $1.5 million. I think that's the language. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. But and again, it's very early in the process, but we've tried that for 2 years. That was sort of where we started in trying to get exemptions. But it's a different climate right now. And I think what's really critical also in that conversation with AB5 has been around equity, not actors equity, but around equity for small budget performing arts organizations as on-ramps for communities of color to be able to access and to be a part and participate in the arts. And if we make it prohibitively expensive for us to be able to engage in the arts, it makes it more difficult for us to see those kind of on-ramps happening. So we do see this as also an issue around cultural organizations being able to continue to do the really critical work that they're doing in communities. And ideally, we just have so much money that everyone can pay each other a living wage. That would be the ultimate goal. But let's be honest, we can get there. We need to make sure that we're also not really, creating situations of unintended consequences from legislation that are putting really vital and important organizations out of business.
Thank you. Casey Tibbetts asked an honest question. Given AB5 and 2257 did not exempt performers, why should we expect the new bills to?
Yeah, it's not going to be. I'll be honest with you. Again, things. I'm never going to ever make predictions about what can happen in a legislative session, but I can tell you that it's a tough one. It's not going to be an easy exemption to get. But Senator Rubio, who's introduced this, is a fighter, and she was the also who brought newspapers, an exemption for newspaper workers and for newspapers that came up against directly Lorena Gonzalez's bill. So there's some history there of them doing that. So you've got a fighter in Rubio, which is really wonderful. I think what we also have to see, also Prop 22 is passed. So, that has changed the scenario. We also know that arts organizations and arts workers are really suffering right now. So we don't really want a 1-2 punch of COVID and AB5 on top of everything. However, I always want to balance it with, ultimately, we really want to get to a place where everybody is getting at least minimum wage and benefits of employment. That is not something we don't want to achieve ultimately. It's just not necessarily how we've built our industry, and therefore we need to figure out ways to work within that scenario, whether that is also other benefits that we could structure for self-employment that can really benefit people who are self-employed.
Thank you. We have a comment from Tony Bevette. Tony, I miss seeing you at every single city council meeting and at every single event. So I don't see your picture here, but very glad to just see your words written. Just wanted to see, he has questions about public awareness. There's that picture. Hi, Tony. About public awareness for the funding for veterans and military families on the state level. And then Jonathan Gless followed up to say, San Diego SETCH has a unique military center, and wanted to know how San Diego as a region could perhaps help on the state level.
Well, I think that there's amazing and important data that shows what is the critical correlation between arts programs and veterans and PTSD and trauma. And I think that the correlation to what we're experiencing now, not correlating war and necessarily COVID, but in terms of just trauma and mental health, that we are trying to deal with as a state and as a nation. I think that we need to talk about what is that arts can do in terms of providing a solution for that, utilizing the narrative and the data that we've learned from these really successful arts and veterans programs. So I think that that's something that, you know, we always want to continue to share and support. And the other thing is that, I'll be honest with you, a lot of times, you know, if you go in and you're talking to a legislature and you're talking about the, you know, arts make you feel good or whatever it is that we're talking about, it's really not so much that they grasp onto. Often it is like a really specific program and data and then a story that helps them to understand it. And there are many you know, there are many veterans in our legislature who really do also understand the value of these arts programs for veterans. So Tony, we will continue to build upon that work. I do know that the Department of Defense actually for the first time included the program that they have in the NEA in their actual budget this year, which is massive. If the Department of Defense can admit that the arts can make a difference for veterans and returning soldiers, I think that you know, we are well on our way to, if I could say, infiltrating to get the arts really at the forefront of solutions. So very exciting. I can share that also if it's helpful for anyone.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and share our last poll, and then we'll also be taking some photos of this beautiful group. So we'll want your consent there, and by just blocking your video is a way that you can kind of work around those pictures as we get those taken and deploy the last survey. I just want to kind of comment maybe for Jonathan or Julie. Fiona Chatwin was concerned that she hasn't reached out to public officials, and you know, great, thank you for sharing that honesty and wanting some guidance on how to do that. Just to share the results, 34% of the people here have not reached out to their electeds in the last 3 to 4 months. So Fiona, you're not alone, and I know we have Advocacy 101 trainings coming, and one of our city commissioners offered some guidance on there, but anything quick that you can say about giving updates, you know, not necessarily having to advocate for money or anything specifically, of how, you know, a quick and easy way to advocate with local electeds, Jonathan or Julie, to share?
Sure, I'll jump in really quickly. So firstly, start with your own, and it doesn't have to be the elected to him or herself. Get to know the staff. Invite them to, you know, informal activities you're doing in parks or what have you. Their outreach team are extraordinary. They're working literally 7 days a week, 14 hours. Their whole job is to be engaged. So don't feel like you need to go to the top of the team. They're all very egalitarian teams, but they want to know what's going on in their communities. So they'll respond quickly.
I'll just second what Jonathan said in terms of staff. A lot of times people are disappointed when they don't get to speak to the elected themselves. And I can tell you the staff are actually the ones who are there for longer often, and who are delivering and writing the materials that they present to their elected, who might tell you what they're focused on, but the staff is so critical to that role. So don't ever be disappointed you only got staff. And the other thing is that, as you see from your own mayor, you know, these are long-term relationships. Advocacy is a long game. You might show up in a crisis, but the consistency is critical. So really showing up on a consistent basis, develop that relationship. And it can be as simple as calling and saying, who manages, and you can use these terms, who manages your arts portfolio within the office, right? There is somebody, and they're going to put you towards that person, and you're going to talk to them. You're going to say, I'm in this legislator's district. I would love to tell you what we're experiencing, and I'd like to know what they're doing for the arts right now. And simple as that. And there's no reason you should be afraid of doing that. That's what they're there for. They are elected and they want to hear from you. But the thing that I'll leave you with is that if they don't know there's a problem, they're not going to solve it. So if we don't show up and share that there's some problems for our sector, legislation, budgets, all of it is about solving problems. So let them know if you've got issues. And so let them know that they can help.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I know we're coming up on time,
Teresa.
and
Yeah.
I know, Teresa, if you'd like to say something here at the end too. Thank you for the time on this lunch hour. Just want to say something in the comments I thought was insightful from Tyler. Getting to know the staff members is maybe just as important as the electeds. Forming those relationships is a great pathway too. I also want to mirror some comments that were made in regards to Larry Baza. It's hard. I mean, he affected us in such a great way that maybe we can lead with what Victoria was saying in honoring Larry with our advocacy this year. And I appreciate Patricia Fisher's comments and just realizing, using arts and arts advocacy as a way for catharsis in these type of moments is a huge benefit. Teresa, would you like to add some final thoughts?
I'm typing something in the chat. Just
okay.
Just about Todd Gloria when he was a city council member at a budget meeting when we were all there advocating for funding, and he said very specifically, don't just come here when you're asking for money for funding. You need to come and see us when you just want to share what you have happening at your organization or your arts community, because we need to hear from you more often. So again, it echoes what Julie's already really said, and Jonathan too, that now he's our mayor, so we just can't appear at budget meetings.
Great, thank you. And so that's direct to them and direct to either Sdrac or CFTA can also assist with any of that. Thank you everyone for your time. I think we're going to wrap it up. So great to have.
Matt, did we do the fourth poll? Just making sure.
Yes, we did.
Okay, great.
And Julie, would you like to bring us home?
Sure. I'm sorry. And Matt and I, sorry if I step on him. He's so amazing, and I'm so thrilled that he's with us. I wasn't sure if we wanted to also do did you do the screenshot already? I think maybe she did. Here are some upcoming events, and we'll hope that you'll continue to work with us, Sdrac, your city. You have amazing advocates in San Diego. We all look to you guys for leadership in so many different ways. And once again, we will dedicate our work at the state and local level to Larry Baza and the legacy he leaves, and we will uplift the dedication he has made to arts and culture in San Diego and to the state with all of our efforts coming up. So thanks everybody, and we look forward to continued working with you, and come to our events. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I just want to share that
Great.
with other advocates, because it's just really important, and it matches a federal effort that's going on as well nationally to change the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, right on. No, that's great. We'll definitely put in our support for that. And I have a meeting with Kamlager's office actually later today. So
good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can mention that to her, that artists are also going to try to support this, if you feel like you can say that. Yeah,
I think we can. I mean, I have to take it back to our policy committee, but it definitely is in line with what we also supported last year.
right.
And so I would hope that it would continue. So I don't see why not. We're really dedicated to making sure that there are anti-racism actual practices in policy. And that's a direct link. And we've been really clear in our own internal work and recognizing that we can't get to cultural equity without racial equity.
That's right. Yeah. And you look at how inequitable the justice system has been applied all along. And then you look at arts and corrections and see how important the arts are in rehabilitation and how
For
much
sure.
arts education we need to be spread equitably in order to prevent so much incarceration. So it's part of a long trail of injustice in every direction. So thank you for that. That was my footnote that I wanted.
No, I appreciate it. I always love your footnotes. Good to see you.
Yeah,
And
nice to see you too. And
yeah, and I'll reach out about the California Creative Corps legislation too, because it would be great to have you look at that.
I just quickly looked at the link from Senator Ben Allen, and I didn't see a budget item in there, but
It's not yet a budget request. It's legislation, doesn't have an appropriations attached to it yet. It's more just to talk first about socializing the language, what would the core program look like, how would it be living in sort of perpetuity. And then right now there's $15 million in budget language that
from the
governor
governor's budget.
Yeah.
And that would go to the Arts Council to administer.
That's correct.
Great. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I can be part of the public comment on the 25th, but I'll certainly try to turn up and put in
I
my
know.
comments on it.
Too many conflicting meetings.
Well, we're doing a webinar on the 25th on
Yeah.
music law and mediation and the CASE Act. And do you know about the CASE Act, which has small claims court provision for the federal copyright
Okay.
within the federal copyright office? And so that just passed as part of the stimulus bill that passed at the end of December. So it's a really important thing for artists to know about. It'll be a year or two before it's implemented, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep track on that too then. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know
Sure.
about that one. There's
Yeah.
so many.
There's so much to know about. I don't know how you can keep up with all of this.
I don't think anybody can. I don't know.
Great job. I'm behind you, Julie.
I know you're right there with us.
I got your back.
Thanks, Alma. You're the
And
best.
I'm so sad to hear about Larry. I just heard about that at this meeting. When did he
Oh.
pass?
Saturday.
Oh,
I
was it
understand.
COVID related? I hope not.
It was COVID.
Oh, geez.
I know.
Oh, that's so sad. That breaks my heart.
Ours as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, take
All
care. As we
right.
said in the business, keep calm and carry on.
There it is. All right. Take care,
Next time.
everybody. Unless anyone else wants to add anything. Tara, Tony, I see you still hanging on. No? Okay. All right. Then I'm going to end this meeting.
Okie dokie. Bye.